In a world where Twitter leads the headlines and the 24-hour news cycle forces people to choose sides, we're here to help you cut through the noise and discover that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Hosted by entrepreneur, author, public speaker, and regular media contributor Seth Denson. Subscribe, share, rank, and review. Welcome to Somewhere in the Middle on the Real News Communication Network.
It's over. And yet, it's just begun. The 2018 midterms are in the books, and the 2020 presidential election has begun. Welcome to Somewhere in the Middle. I'm your host, Seth Denson, joined as always by Andrew Clark. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing just fine.
And Zach Lewis behind the helm.
Hello, hello.
How are you, bud?
I'm doing good.
I'm sitting here trying to watch while I'm doing my show, Beto ORourke. Thank everybody while eating donuts, apparently, in El Paso. So
doing a Facebook Live thing, I guess?
Yeah, you know, he's good at that stuff.
Sure.
You know, so big show today. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. We'll cover it rather quickly. But Somewhere in the Middle is on a special day and time. We wanted to kind of postpone the show to do a post-election wrap-up. Kind of what happened, how did it go, and that's what we're doing today. So we'll talk about the election. I want to talk about specifically Beto ORourke and Ted Cruz here in Texas. Obviously, it's one we've brought up a lot on the show. We want to talk about, I want to spend a little bit of time on attack ads because thank God the ads are over, right? I mean, oh my gosh.
Oh, the emails and the texts.
It's like if I get one more text message.
Oh, God.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was ready for those to be over. And yeah, I'm glad that they are.
I really did. I forgot about like how beautiful the sound of silence is. I woke up this morning, not a single email in my inbox, not a single text message. I'm like, oh man, this is kind of nice.
I know, right? Andrew, how many times did you get reached out to in the last week?
It was coming out to like 6 times a day. I had door knockers, phone calls, and text messages.
Oh, wow. You had door-to-doors? I didn't get a single one.
Which, by the way, you're a brave person in Texas for knocking on doors, asking to endorse a Democratic candidate. I will give you mad props for that.
Yeah.
Because I imagine the response most of the time is probably not pleasant.
No, probably not, especially not in our county.
No.
We live in Collin County, one of the most conservative counties in Texas, and so that makes sense. I want to talk about today, so we're going to talk about the Beto ORourke, Ted Cruz. We're going to talk about the Senate campaign. We want to talk about kind of some of the attack ads, and I was interested in listening to some of the ads over the last few days, and just on both sides, how inaccurate information is, yet they spin it in a way that if you are an uninformed voter, you go, oh my gosh, that person is horrible. How could we ever vote for them? And so we'll talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about why I think that the Republicans lost the House of Representatives, and I'm going to take it from a direction different than just the historical context. So historically, I think 3 out of 3 midterms in the last 120 years, the party in power of the White House hasn't lost seats in the House of Representatives. That's only not happened 3 times in the last 120 years. So that said, that's 60 midterms, right?
Yeah.
And only 3 of the 60 didn't lose. I don't think, though, that this was a historical thing. I think that this was a reality of the situation that they found themselves in, and we'll talk about that here briefly. And then I want to talk about what it means for the Democrats to take over the House of Representatives. I think everybody this morning is already talking about the gridlock that will be found in Washington. I think that there are ways to get things done, but Democrats are going to be able to control that. And this one's up to Democrats. Democrats, if you're listening and you want to win 2020 or 2022, I got some tips for you today. So pay attention. And then, you know, we'll just kind of wrap it up with a little bit of where do we go from here as a country. You know, I got calls from friends on both sides of the political aisle this morning, obviously trolling social media. You hear that the world is ending and everybody... It's not quite as bad, I think, as what 2016 was in seeing the people that lost. But what's interesting was I saw some Republicans that were upset because obviously the Republicans lost the House of Representatives. And then I saw Democrats that were upset because the Republicans maintained the Senate. Obviously in Texas, we saw a lot of people upset about the Beto ORourke and Ted Cruz campaigns, election. And so I think that we're going to be okay. I don't think it, I know it. And so I want to just kind of have a maybe Mr. Rogers moment today. And so I've worn if you're watching versus listening, I've worn the closest Mr. Rogers sweater that I could find today.
It's good. It's a good sweater.
You like it? Thank you.
Not bad. Yeah.
So I'm not in my normal suit attire. So I got to the office today and everybody's like, "Oh, you're not wearing a suit." I'm like, "Yeah, I got an idea." And so we'll talk about that. Where I land on this, little "Won't You Be My Neighbor?"
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that.
I like the sound of that. I'm looking forward to it, honestly.
good.
Yeah, I think we can use it.
So let's talk a little bit about. Let's start with maybe the Beto ORourke and Ted Cruz campaign. So, obviously just kind of resetting.
Womp womp.
The Democrats won the House of Representatives. No shocker to anybody, I think, here. We all kind of thought that was going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that by no means did we have a blue wave.
Whoa, hold on, Andrew. You're shaking your head in there.
We'll come back. Yeah.
Oh, will we?
Blue wave in Texas or in general?
In general.
In general, it's looking like the youth. It looks like the under 30s did not show up again.
Really? I'm so surprised. Didn't we talk about this?
Everyone said on Facebook they were going.
Well, I know. And if tweeting and hashtagging were voting.
Now, to be fair, Texas specifically. So in the 2016s, Texas had about 8 million show up and vote. And we had something like 6.5 million yesterday. As opposed to, or over the last week, as opposed to about the 4 million that normally show up for a midterm.
Okay.
So to be fair, Texas did have an additional about 1.5 million, 2 million people show up for this election.
Yeah.
That is a lot. But they weren't the young people. It was the 40s to 70s. Because as the demographics are breaking in, we have polling data. Once again, my generation didn't show up. I don't know where they're at. And no matter which way you're going to vote on that, Republican or Democrat, but they didn't show up. And yet I guarantee you, when I go online to Facebook, there's not going to be a single one of my peers that is going to be like, well, I can't talk about the election because I didn't vote. No one will admit it, and yet the numbers show that half of you weren't there.
Yeah.
So half of my friends are liars.
Yeah.
Somewhere you're hiding in there.
I want to jump in and defend the youth, of course, because I'm in that generation.
The youth?
Too. It's the same problem you've got, though. It's the same issue. Yeah, I'm like, you didn't. What is this? Like, nobody turns out. I don't know. That's it.
Was that your defense of the youth?
No. My defense of the wave, if you don't mind, so I can jump in here. Andrew, you want to?
Well, the wave being, it's fun to show up to a Willie Nelson concert and wear a shirt that says I'm with her, or Beto all the way, and then, hey, I need you to go stand in line for 2 hours in a gymnasium. You can't use your cell phone. It's hot. It's crowded. There's 2 machines. No, I need to go to the gym.
A skeptic would say that's an indictment of the voting system and not the voters, but that's.
But at the end of the day, if you were really committed, you'd stand in line for as long as it takes to make it through a Game of Thrones episode.
I did go stand in line for as long as it takes to get through.
Attaboy.
Yeah, to be fair, I think we all did. So,
You know what? I'm actually okay with the fact that voting isn't as easy as it needs to be. Or could be.
I was a little
Put it that
scared
way.
yesterday. Go on.
And let me say this, because I want there to have to be some commitment to this.
Yeah.
Because
I can get that.
Otherwise, people just aren't going to get informed. They're going to vote based on what they read somebody else say. Attack ads have even more power, and we'll talk about attack ads here in a second and how misleading they actually are. And so I think that the challenge that we have is if voting became so simple that I could just tweet it out, then you would end up with such radical shifts based on the emotions of the day and nobody being educated on what they needed to know. And that's, I think, what we saw here. So I stood in line for all of 30 seconds.
Lucky you.
So I did my research, and I found out that the best polling place in where I live was the courthouse at 7 a.m. Like, nobody's there. I'd talked to a couple people. My wife had gone a few days before during early voting, and she said, hey, it was a breeze. I walked in there, and it's listen, I love all the people that are willing to donate their time and to volunteer for that, but it's like, it's a senior citizens event.
I want to get to that in a minute.
It's really kind of fun in there. And so I go in there, and I vote, and I did my thing, and I was in and out in less than 5 minutes, got a nice little sucker and a sticker, and I was on my way.
The people at my polling place were in their mid to late 80s, and they're doing those digital cards with the little chip in it. So you have to show your ID, and they give you a card, and you plug the card into the voting machine, and then you do your votes. You bring them back the chipped card, and then that's how it's cast. It's not paper here. But they have to punch in a number to identify it to you as a person, and they're like, oh, 162, 142, no, 162. 126. It was like, oh my gosh, my vote's not going to count.
Yeah,
Some lady is deaf.
I can do with there being a little bit of a hoop to jump through for voting. I get that. You're right. Commitment's important. I can do without that. The potential mess up. It's fine. It's fine. I did want to for a second talk about the wave, as it were. It certainly was not any kind of
tsunami.
No, but and I would argue part of the reason it doesn't seem like that is because we've been talking about a blue wave for like 2 years. Since January 1st, 2017, Democrats have been marching and protesting, and they wanted to convert that into votes, and clearly they didn't quite get there in the way they thought they were gonna. But for what it's worth, there was some movement on the needle. They took back the House. They have a half of a foothold of a part of a branch of the government, right? Yeah,
they do, and I'll give them credit on that. I think that part of that, we saw some. I think it was some redistricting in Pennsylvania that helped, and there were some other things going on. Obviously, there were people that were motivated against the Trump campaign. I think that what happened was, I do think that the Democrats would have had a much greater gain than they had, if not for a few key things. And I think that we can tie those back to what happened in Texas with Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz. So, Beto O'Rourke, to use a sports analogy, peaked too soon. He did.
Okay.
So, here's the thing. I don't think this is surprising to most people. Ted Cruz, he's not likable. He's just not. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about his policies or even the fact that he might be an awesome guy. But on camera, in a speech, he seems disingenuous and not likable.
He needs a marketing team. He needs a vocal coach
and a marketing team. He needs to take the horrible blue blazer off, roll up the sleeves every once in a while, and take a page out of Barack's book.
Right.
Right? And Beto did that. Beto was the kind of reincarnation of what Barack Obama was in the beginning. And so when we saw that, I thought to myself, okay, Beto is getting that immediate push, right? He's getting that immediate likability benefit.
Yeah, he's got that charisma, and it feels genuine for it.
That's right. West Texas charm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, people from West Texas don't really consider El Paso West Texas, even though it is the western point of
Is
West
that like
Texas.
eastern New Mexico?
It's like northern southern Texas.
Ah.
All right. So just FYI from a geographics lesson.
Good to know.
West Texaner. West Texas begins on the west side of Abilene and ends on the west side of Odessa. That's it. It's just kind of right there. Anyway, we'll come back to that episode some other time. Yeah. But anyway, when we're talking about this, I think that a few things happened with Beto O'Rourke. One is he peaked too soon, and what I mean by that is he came onto the scene too early to hit his peak, and people were enamored with him. And then the Cruz campaign had the opportunity to point out Beto O'Rourke's pretty progressive. And I said this from the beginning. It's why I predicted on our last show that Ted Cruz would ultimately win, is because Texas is still a very conservative state. It's still a conservative state. And because Texas is a conservative state, eventually that message, that allure, the sizzle wears off the steak. Let's just say it that way. And that's what happened, I think, with Beto O'Rourke. Is, yes, he was personable, but he almost annoyed us with his 254 counties, right? He has this way of talking where he's just kind of constantly shoving his hand in your face, which the first couple times you're going, oh, this is inspiring. Like, this guy's motivated. He's a good speaker. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, yeah, now you're a little much for me, right? And I'm sorry, if you're going to sweat that much, wear an undershirt. I'm just saying.
It's to show how much of a hard worker he is, Seth. It's visual.
Ted Cruz, here's my fashion tips to. I'm the person giving fashion tips, right? But here's my fashion tips to Ted Cruz. Take the blue blazer off, man. You look like Grandpa Joe that nobody wants to be around, or that jerk in college that we all know the ones I'm talking about, right? The one that kind of walked around campus pretentious.
You forgot to collect our homework.
That's
son
right.
of a.
Yeah. So that's who Ted Cruz comes across as, and Beto O'Rourke still kind of comes across as the guy that, bro, you need to kind of shower, man. Sure. So anyway, I think that's part of it. Beto peaked too early. Second thing is, Texas is still conservative, and the Cruz campaign was able to point out that Beto O'Rourke, beyond his likability factor, is progressive. And there's just not enough progressives in Texas to make that work. The third thing, People aren't going to like me saying it.
Uh-oh.
Dun-dun.
Kavanaugh. Republicans needed something to be motivated about. Beto O'Rourke, I think, lost less to Chuck Schumer than he did to Ted Cruz. Because what happened after the Kavanaugh hearings was it woke Republicans up and saying, this is where we're headed. This is what's going to happen. What happened to Justice Kavanaugh during the confirmation hearings, again, we can go back and debate that whole thing. The way it was handled was poor. It was absolutely poor. Americans want to give people the benefit of the doubt. They want innocent until proven guilty. They want people to get the due process.
Yeah.
And the way that the Democrats handled that removed that, and it made Republicans motivated to say, hey, we might like this Beto O'Rourke guy from a likability factor, but if we vote for him, we're effectively voting for Chuck Schumer, and we can't let that happen. And I think that's ultimately why Beto lost. So, what does Beto need to do, or the next Beto in Texas, if a Democrat ever wants to win in Texas? Recognize Texas is a conservative state. I think if Beto did not come out with such progressive opinions and thoughts on things,
A little less Ellen, maybe.
that's right.
Ellen,
Little less
is that what you said?
Ellen. He went on
was on-
Ellen
he was on
DeGeneres.
Ellen and was-
and by the way, I like Ellen DeGeneres.
Yeah.
I don't get to watch daytime television much, but she's kind of entertaining. But he went on Stephen Colbert, right?
Right,
And Texans who wanted to be in that middle ground and say, I want to be open to this guy, started going, yeah, he's kind of hanging out with that Hollywood crowd, which, by the way, going back to our episode from a few weeks ago, I wasn't rooting against anybody in this election, but there was a part of me that kind of smiled when everybody that Hollywood came out for lost.
It's good.
Yeah, I mean, at least we think so. I think Stacey Abrams is still expected to lose. She's losing right now. I think they're going to count the absentee ballots. But, and again, I don't have a dog in that fight between her and Kemp in Georgia. But when Oprah came out and all these folks came out to support her, and then she ends up losing. Taylor Swift, everybody she endorsed in Tennessee lost.
Yeah, I spied that last night, and I was like, oh, but here's to Seth Denson for calling that weeks ago. Yeah, that's
right. So I mean, So it's funny. I got Jeff Chin, one of my best friends, reached out to me right before the election results came in. He says, "All right, predictions," and he asked me about Florida. He asked me about Georgia and Texas and House. And so far, knock on wood, I was right. So no Karl Rove here. And again, I think you could have put a blinker on this election, but it ended up the way that I thought it would. And for those of you who are Republicans freaking out over the Democrats having control of the House of Representatives, chill out. You're fine. For Democrats who are so worried about the fact that Trump is still the president. By the way, he was still going to be the president after yesterday's election. That wasn't going to change that.
But I tweeted.
I know.
sorry.
You're fine. You're fine today. Matter of fact, Democrats that can hang their hat on a little bit, that they got a little bit more of a seat at the table because they are going to control the committees. They're going to control subpoena power. And don't get me wrong, there's big things in that. You want to see what Trump's tax returns look like?
I do, actually.
We're going to.
No.
I have no doubt that Democrats are going to go after those. And so, that's a big part of it. But, I think Democrats, they have a couple of things that they need to be cognizant of here. They have two directions they can go with this thing. They have control of the House, which means they have control of subpoena power, committees, all of that. They can go the route of, let's make this a referendum against Trump. And look, I think Nancy Pelosi's already come out saying, let's not talk impeachment. That's smart. Nancy Pelosi was around when Newt Gingrich tried to do that. Didn't bode well for old Newt or the Republicans in 94.
Right.
Or following the election of 94, right? So I think that Nancy Pelosi is a good enough politician. She realizes that's probably not a place to go. Let's let the Kavanaugh thing go. Let's let the President Trump thing go. Because the first thing I heard last night late, or probably early this morning, was, well, should we be prepared for Kavanaugh to possibly be impeached, or definitely for Trump to be impeached? And I think that that's you want to motivate Republicans, and not just Republicans. You want to motivate people in the middle. against you, that's the way to do it. Because most level-headed Americans don't want a system where whoever gets in power has the opportunity to impeach somebody. We go down that road. What?
I was going to say, I remember some chants about lock her up, but I'll go ahead and step back on that one.
Ooh.
But it didn't happen, did it?
No, fortunately not.
No.
I mean, for all the things we can say about President Trump, he was smart enough to realize that that's probably not a rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah. I would like to put an asterisk on your impeachment category here, and that would be just barring the Mueller, who had said he's not releasing anything until after the election. The election is done. I am interested to see now if Jeff Sessions will retain his job for much longer.
I think Jeff's out one way or the other.
And what the Mueller investigation brings up. But apart from that, we can always come back to that in another month. So,
well, listen,
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Give it a month, we'll come back.
I agree.
Sure.
When you're talking about impeachment, if there's an impeachable offense out there,
That's
we're
different.
talking a different game. I'm talking about what we know today.
well, I just don't like him. That's not good enough.
That's not the way the Constitution. That's not the way it was supposed to be. That's not the way it works. So Democrats have an opportunity here. There are things. I've said this all along. Donald Trump is more liberal than most Republicans. He's an infrastructure guy. Matter of fact, he used to be a Democrat. I think there are things. I can say this as a Southerner. He's a Yankee, right? He's from up north. He's going to have some different, more progressive thoughts on things.
Sure.
I think that the the Democrats have an opportunity to work with the president on some things if they can get past themselves on this. And if not, what they're going to do is over the next 2 years, they're going to do nothing. And they're going to become what the Republicans became to Obama, which is the party that just prevented anything from happening. And Democrats have an opportunity here to step up and to actually make a difference. I watched all of the speeches yesterday of every candidate, whether they were Republican or Democrat, and the one underlying theme, anybody has a guess?
Unity?
Unity. That's it. That's right. We must come together. Really? You're now in leadership. It's your role. So we also had, here in Texas, we had the Pete Sessions and Allred, Collin Allred election. Those outside of Texas probably didn't follow it much. But Pete Sessions is, goodness, what a three-term, no, more than that. He's been
I thought it was like 74.
Yeah.
Do I have that right?
No. It was 2004.
Oh,
2004.
okay.
He's been a
2004,
congressman, Dallas County, part of Collin County here in Texas since 2004. He actually ran unopposed in his last election. Like, Democrats didn't even bother even putting somebody up for that. Then they realized, well, Hillary took that district. Maybe we should have paid attention. And they nominated Collin Allred. Collin Allred, former NFL football player, very likable guy, good speaker. He's a civil rights attorney. And there were two things that really helped him. One is that A, he had that likability factor. B, he's in Dallas County, which went for Hillary. And C, he got the benefit of Beto ORourke, where people came out to vote and did straight line party ticket. Dallas County had 34% straight line party ticket votes. That's huge.
I hate that.
I do too.
I hate that.
And Faith Johnson lost the DA. I think there's a lot of elections that they can go thank Beto ORourke. Lupe Valdez running for governor against Greg Abbott didn't stand a chance. The only reason she did any better than she did was because of straight line ticket voting. That's right. She rode the coattails. So I think that Collin Allred he should buy a steak dinner to Beto ORourke and thank him for that. But here's the thing. Collin Allred ran not as a progressive. He ran more of a moderate. Now, Pete Sessions tried to paint him as a progressive, but he ran as a moderate and very clearly came out and said, listen, I don't want to be known as the Democrat from this congressional district. I want to be the congressman from this congressional district, and I want to listen to all parties. Everything I would want to hear somebody say, right? Well, guess what? Collin Allred, you have an opportunity now. Go do it. Go do it. Don't just become the Ponzi or the pawn for Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer up there. So here, Democrats have the opportunity, and that's part one. Lead. If you get the opportunity now, go lead. Don't become petty. Move the needle. Things like infrastructure they can work on. I think that they can work on healthcare together. Listen, I think that's the other thing I mentioned earlier. I don't think that the Republicans lost necessarily because of history, and history would say that they were going to lose seats in the House of Representatives. I think that they failed in large part because they did not motivate Republican voters because since 2010, they have run on health care. They got power, and they couldn't get it done. I noticed in the ads over the last few days, Democrats were doubling down on that. Healthcare was the rallying cry. Why? Because nobody cared anymore about healthcare on the Republican side. Only people that cared about healthcare were the people that were getting the benefits from the Affordable Care Act. They needed to motivate those people. And Republican voters, independent voters that healthcare was their topic, were so frustrated at Democrats over this, or at Republicans over this, that they just weren't going to turn out. There was nothing to motivate them. So I think that Republicans failed miserably by not fulfilling that which they were elected to do. And as such, this race went the way it did. So Democrats, here's my tip to you. Don't fall the way. If you want to stay in power, don't do the same thing the Republicans did and not get something done. Now, you can argue that the Republicans are going to hold the Senate, and likely, based on the numbers, the Republicans are going to hold the Senate through 2022. Because the elections those Republican senators, the senatorial elections that are going to come up in 2020, aren't enough that even if the Republicans lose those, that's going to hand power back over. It's something like more Democratic seats are up for re-election.
Yeah,
so,
Democrats will have to hold on to a lot of their seats.
Yeah, so that's a big part. So Democrats don't fall into the trap of not being willing to work with President Trump and the Republicans in the Senate. Find something to find common ground on, and that's okay. Let's work together. That's what the Founding Fathers wanted, right?
On that note, I am excited to watch Mitt Romney, not a Democrat, but he and the president went loggerheads at the election.
Yeah.
And I am excited to watch Senator Romney now.
Yeah, but I think that they had their little mea culpa and a little makeup kumbaya session because I think Romney wanted to be the Secretary of State or something like that. So he
there is a sad picture of them at dinner. Have you seen that?
Yeah. No, but
Trump's got a big grin on his face. And
let me go looking for that. Give me a second. I'll find that picture. Yeah, go hold on.
Yeah,
you guys
I think that Romney finally kissed the ring and recognized that it is what it is, and he's the president, and I need to get on board, and that's what happened. So, I think that is another big part of this is, Democrats have that opportunity. But here's the other thing that Democrats need to do. They need to find new leadership.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, you guys have your time is over.
They're the best thing for Republican motivation.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. If Nancy Pelosi retains the Speaker of the House, and it sounds like she's going to, I don't think there's anybody in there that they've identified that could
give
take
it to Cortez. Come on, let's see how this goes.
Hey, you watch out. You don't know what they'll do with Cortez.
You never know.
Yeah, hey.
You never know. I'm anxious to see how again, I'm not faulting somebody. I'm proud that she stepped up and good for her. But
28, well done.
Did you listen to some of this interview she did? I mean, she's got a lot of learning to do. And this is not something you want necessarily a bunch of on-the-job training.
Oh, there it is.
There's that.
Oh, it's such a sad
on
picture.
Facebook for a moment.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
For our Game of Thrones fans.
Yeah.
There's your Christmas card. You gotta love that.
Love the Romney family.
Oh,
Brutal.
man. So, I guess I think that Democrats have an opportunity here, or they will find themselves right back where they've been in that they will lose if they don't find new leadership. I think that leadership staying the way it is helps the Republicans.
Yeah, I've heard also while I'm thinking about it, I've heard that Nancy Pelosi, even from Democrats, like they see her and they go, really again? Well, really, we're doing this?
Well,
I don't know. Is she the hot pick? I don't know enough about her.
Well, today some of the water cooler conversation has been, all right, 2020 presidential candidates, who's coming up? And it's like, well, I hear it's going to be Hillary and Bernie, and it's like, why? We've done this.
Joe Biden.
We played that game.
All these. No, listen. I think that you are going to see this very large wave of women Democratic candidates. And listen, we're going to start hearing about them tomorrow, if not today.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren, absolutely running for president. Anybody thinking she's not running?
No, Harris probably on a VP ticket.
Oh, I think Harris is going to go for gold. She'll end up on the VP ticket just because she doesn't have it. But
that's what I mean. I'm thinking Biden-Harris. I think that's how it's going to land.
You got Cory Booker. He's going to run. There's a number of folks on the Democratic ticket that are going to run. And
well, you know who the Twitter thinks the long shot is?
Who's that?
Beto ORourke.
Beto 2020.
Is it seriously? I was joking.
I have seen that.
I wish I was joking, Seth. I really do. No, Twitter was all about it last night. Beto 20. I was like, oh God, what are we doing?
The reincarnation of Obama.
2020.
He really was. I mean, he came out with kind of that same allure. I even saw the same style posters.
If it's worth anything, he got more votes than Hillary Clinton did in Texas. So that's something. And I know Texas is red. I don't know about the rest of the country. And it's a national race. He didn't take a dime of PAC money supposedly, but it's too soon. Right? Yeah. Am I crazy? Is that nuts? I don't know.
Not in today's political climate. I wouldn't say that that's crazy.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, as fast as it all moves, 2 years is ancient history by the time we roll around that.
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, but the thing is, 2 years is ancient history. But the presidential election starts today.
Mm-hmm.
It's on now. So you got to be recognizing that the Republicans are locked in, obviously, with Trump. And anybody think somebody's going to try to run against him in a primary?
Who Republicans?
That would be not so naive.
No way.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard it.
I'll do it.
The California conservative. Here he is, folks.
For the state of competition and for the sake of argument, I'd love it if somebody did. I don't think anybody will.
Nobody's going
that
to.
would be foolish.
It would be political suicide, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
I think we've all recognized it. Again, and we'll talk about this here in just a second, but there are those that would follow him, President Trump, off of a cliff. There are those that are more open-minded, I would say, reasonable Americans who say, yeah, I mean, listen, I'll support him. He's the president, but at the same time, there are some things that I don't like about him, and there's some policy things I like and some personality things I don't. And then the same thing on the left, right? So there's people that are going to say, yeah, I would follow Elizabeth Warren off of a cliff. And then there's others that are going to go, okay, she's kind of progressive, but I still would side with her over this. So I think that you have that, and it'll be interesting to see who comes out of the woodworks over the next month or two. And listen, the Kavanaugh hearings very much told us all of the senators on the Democratic side that are planning to put their hat in that ring. That was nothing but a kowtow, right? So now what we've got to do is really try to decide, where is this going to go? You keep looking at a chart on your phone,
I'm sorry.
like it's
What's
driving me nuts.
I'm sorry. I keep
Are
almost
you thinking that there's an election not over?
I keep almost being able to bring it up, so I'm just going to force it up here.
Do it.
Cruz only won by 203,000 votes.
Yep.
And I say only 203,000 votes. But he won at 50.9%. It was close.
Very close. Listen, I get
so much for your 9% spread
close.
we were hearing.
It was close. I get it.
I'm
Here's
sorry,
the
get
thing.
rid of that.
And again, I think that there are those key factors that I mentioned. A, the likability factor. Policy or not, people want to vote for somebody they kind of like. And Ted Cruz needs somebody to coach him up on how to be more likable, or Republicans need to find somebody else to run in 2022. Right?
Yeah.
Or 2024.
24, right?
2024.
Yeah,
24.
Cut to Andrew. Surely he knows.
2024. The second thing, though, is that, as I mentioned earlier, Beto peaked too soon. And it allowed the Republican machine to get in there and really start to highlight those things that were a bit too progressive, which leads to the third point, was that Beto was just too progressive for Texas. And those 200,000 people, we were watching that last night when it was really close. And, I think on NBC they kept talking about, well, Harris County hasn't completely come in and Dallas County hasn't completely come in. And those are very left-wing or liberal, more liberal-leaning voters. I'm looking at West Texas where I'm from. And I'm going, there's a lot of gray out there, and there may be fewer people, but I guarantee you those folks are going all Cruz.
Yeah, it's all red.
And there's your 200,000 people.
Yep.
Right there. And so I think those were the key things that caused the Beto campaign to implode a little bit. So here's your tip. If you want to run in Texas on a Democratic ticket, you can't be in the same conversation with a Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer. That will not bode well for you. Beto almost got past it, but he just peaked too soon. That's it.
Yeah, and it's a shame. When you mentioned peaking, I was going to say one thing I really liked about Beto was his voting record congressionally, where he was with the state. His 16th district, I think, was him of Texas. He was in just long enough where he didn't really have anything you could slam him for and say, hey, he voted against this thing. This was horrible. Like, he didn't have a record long enough to really crucify him on any one thing, which was beneficial. Now that he is clearly going to do that job for a little longer, maybe something like that will come up. Because he said some things in this election that clearly make him progressive, like you said, which ultimately hurt him.
Yeah, I think so. Again, if you're in the South, you got to recognize we saw it in Missouri. We saw it in, I think we're seeing it in Georgia, obviously across Florida. It's still the South, and it's still conservative, and you've got to be more moderate. You can get away with being more left-wing in other parts of the country, but kind of that Midwestern and Southern section of the country, you've got to be a bit more moderate.
Don't California my Texas.
I saw a post this morning. Texifornia. Thanks for not making it Texifornia or something like that. I think is what I saw.
Not to jump right out of the show, but our 3 o'clock canceled, so we can.
Hey, really? We get another time.
Slow down, yeah.
Well, listen. I mean, again, we can do that, but I do want to. I want to think through and maybe we'll talk about this in the next episode, all of the attack ads that I was watching, because I know we didn't talk about that much, but it was one of those things where I think that we got to be a much more informed electorate. Otherwise, you fall victim to this. Certain things that, and I don't know, Zach, I don't know if you pulled up any of those ads.
Yeah, actually, I got them. Actually, if you want me to play them.
Yeah, let's throw one of them up there. Let's take a look.
Do you have Abigail's?
Yeah, I labeled them. Believe it or not. Yeah, you'd like her first. That's the one you wanna. That's the one you wanna say.
Let's do this.
All right, let me get this queued up here. A little live production, folks. Excuse me.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that we were watching these videos. We were watching these commercials as they were. Thank God that this thing's over. I'm so over these commercials.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a.
Okay.
Take a look at Abigail here. Stand by.
Dead air.
Vamp.
Dead air.
Oh,
Is that what we call this?
It's happening again.
Live
all right,
radio,
here we go.
folks.
There it is.
Abigail Spanberger hiding? Spanberger doesn't want us to know that she taught at an Islamic school nicknamed Terror High, a terrorist breeding ground. One graduate plotted to assassinate President Bush. Another was arrested for trying to bring a butcher knife on an airplane. So dangerous, even Chuck Schumer called for the school to be shut down. But Abigail Spanberger cashed her paychecks like nothing was wrong. Congressional Leadership Fund is responsible for the content of the series.
I don't mean to laugh about this. I mean, it's like terrorism. Oh my God!
It looks real
this
bad.
woman is the devil.
Yeah, the optics are bad.
What is the truth, Andrew?
So the truth is a little mixed. Abigail.
She did teach at Terror High.
She did teach at Terror High. By the way, Terror High being a private school for Muslim children who work for.
They're kids of consulate, or
consulate, yes.
Diplomats?
Diplomats.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah,
so
this is a high end. This is a high end school. She was a substitute teacher, by the way, and she was only teaching there while she was awaiting her background clearance to work as a counterterrorism and nuclear-related CIA operative.
Oh, wow.
She was there while she was undergoing, because top secret clearance takes about 2 years. It is a slow process, and thank you for taking your time on that.
But what I also love, wasn't they mentioned the student that plotted to kill President George W. Bush, and you would think he must have been in her classroom.
Yeah, he went there about 5 years prior to that.
Prior to her actually being a substitute teacher.
He graduated many years before she was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they never met. Nothing. That's not even close.
Gotta love that.
By the way, she did win her seat last night, 7th congressional seat in Virginia. So, well done, Abigail.
All right, we got another one.
Yeah, what's this other
from? This guy actually lost, right?
That would be Afteb.
Yeah, you got that one, Zach?
Yeah, let's see if we can get this on here.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Will say anything to get elected.
The special interests and lobbyists rigged the game to benefit themselves.
Piraval should know he worked at a D.C. lobbying firm. But worse than Piraval's lies is his hypocrisy. Piraval's lobbying firm made millions helping Libya reduce payments owed to families of Americans killed by Libyan terrorism. Selling out Americans? Aftab Piraval can't be trusted. Congressional Leadership Fund is responsible for
the Congressional Leadership Fund is 2 for 2.
Yeah.
But this one, he lost.
Yeah, so he did lose out of Ohio. By the way, yeah, that picture next to Hillary Clinton, probably not a good photo to have when you're running these days. Here's the thing. Couple of mixed truths here. He did work at a firm that was hired by Gaddafi to pay out settlements to Americans, which, by the way, they paid, I think it was $150 million. So they ended up paying out for deaths, by the way, which is terrible.
That's not a great look. Yeah.
No, but he was not a lobbyist. He was an antitrust associate, and those decisions were endorsed by President George W. Bush a month before he was even hired at that firm. So once again, these are bad things that have happened before that individual was there. But now we've knocked the Republicans twice. We should switch over to a Democratic ad. And I don't have the YouTube video for you, but I do want to point out the hypocrisy on the other side here.
Okay.
Brian Fitzpatrick, who is a Republican candidate out of Pennsylvania. And there was an ad that said, I'll do the voice.
Here it comes.
Can you do it like she did it? Because I mean, where do they find these people?
Oh, God.
Would you like to be known that? What's your job? Oh, I'm the TAC ad voice.
Yeah. I'm the attack ad.
If you have a pre-existing condition, Brian Fitzpatrick sold you out. He voted against protecting people with pre-existing conditions 3 separate times. That's not even close to
It's
true.
not bad. No, hey, I'd take it. That's why not?
Sure.
And what runs on attack ads? On what's standard for these things now?
Well, listen, I heard that one a lot, right? That if you vote for Republicans, a vote for cancer. That was effectively the message. So what was the truth here?
So the truth was he voted 3 times along party lines on the procedural votes to move out of the debates on the ACA, which almost everyone votes party lines on those anyway because it's a procedural vote, not a legislative vote.
And, point of order, didn't he in fact vote against the Republican? He's a Republican.
Correct. He was one of the House Republicans who flipped on the ACA vote. He voted against the Trump administration to side with the Democrats on that vote. And how is he paid for it?
Democrats got him. But he won.
He did win his district.
Yes. He's okay.
Yes. Pennsylvania 1st District.
He survived. The one locally that jumped out at me, so there was the race for the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton versus Justin Nelson. I don't think we grabbed that ad either, but I'll just kind of paraphrase. I will try not to do the voice on it. But effectively what the message was that Justin Nelson wants to tax you and use your money to pay for his campaign. He's in support of campaign finance reform. So
one of these things is not like the other.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess you could say technically, yeah, I guess, just in the same way that you would be taxed to pay for the military. Because campaign finance reform, which, by the way, conservative, in support of campaign finance reform.
Yep.
If for nothing else, for my own sanity, to shut these commercials down. Because I am tired of elections where the people with the most money win. That shouldn't be the way it works. Shouldn't be the way it works. And so of all the things that I think of, again, I know I'm a conservative, and here I'm going against Citizens United. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that one. I'm not a fan of that ruling. And the reason is because we need to remove money from politics. We need to remove money from campaign ads. We need to remove the idea that if average Joe, who is a brilliant public servant, wants to run, but unfortunately doesn't have the war chest of somebody who is a total schmo that has no reason to be in power, gets in power because of that, we got to remove that. And so what Justin Nelson is for is what many Americans are for on both the right and the left, and that is for campaign finance reform, where if you choose to run for national public office, there is a specified amount of money you are provided to do just that. And you are not allowed to take money from anybody else. There can be no super PACs. There can be none of that. I'm sure I'm butchering all of the realities of the intricacies of that thought process, but why isn't that a bad thing? That should be a great thing, right? Shouldn't we all want this even playing field? I want to listen to what you have to say. I don't want to hear what lady voice here tells me is not accurate.
I only know the slang for it, and it's not radio appropriate. You know, it's a weird thing. So Jeff Sessions, whom I am not a fan of, sorry, Mr. Sessions, he makes about $300,000 a year on
as
paper,
the Attorney General,
and yet brought in something like $7 million in speaking engagements last year. Don't tell me that's not A, influencing decisions, and B, that's a lot of money for that's so much money that you can buy influence.
Yeah.
So I would have to agree with you on that. Like, there needs to be this limit. If you're a politician, act within this budget.
You know, and the idea is, and again, we did have some level of reform happen. I think McCain was a big player in this. When now you actually have to get candidates say, I'm Ted Cruz and I approve this message. I'm Hillary Clinton and I approve this message. I'm Alicia Cortez and I approve this message. I just wanted to say her name one more time. Likely we'll be talking about her some in the future, though.
Yeah, watch out. Shoot.
Cortez,
who knows where she's
Cortez 2020? She's not old enough. She's not old enough.
No, she's not. Even 35, right?
Yeah, she can't run.
Oh, she's only 29 now.
Yep.
Yeah, give her 6 years.
2024. Yep. Maybe? I'm doing the math in my head. It's not a math day. Anyway, so, listen, I think that if, we'll kind of wrap up the show on what we started with. It's over, and yet it's just begun. So the campaign's over. At least we can put away all these commercials for a while. We don't have to listen to it. But my hope is that we as a country read through the garb. I was going to use something that was less appropriate, but I won't. That half the stuff, and if you see an attack ad, it's probably garbage.
Yeah.
It probably
out of
is.
Context.
That's right.
Use those words, not in that order. Yeah.
That's right. Become informed. If you're going to vote, and vote, we want you to vote, but be an informed voter. Recognize what is being said and what is real and true before you do. And recognize that, you know what? We're okay. We're okay. America's gotten through bigger things than an election. So if you're a Republican today and you're glad that they retained the Senate but disappointed that they lost the House, it's okay. We're going to be fine. And if you're a Democrat who's upset about a specific candidate that might have lost, or that the Democrats didn't retain the House, or that somehow we woke up this morning and Donald Trump was still the president, it's okay. We're going to be fine. Okay? And so I think from a middle perspective here, and is realizing that we got to be bigger than all of this, because our politicians aren't going to be. So it's up to us to be that way, right? Good times. Fellas, thanks. It's always fun. I always love the post-election wrap-up here. This was good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be talking about it. Maybe on the next episode we'll dive into more of who's going to run in 2020 and what that's going to look like on either side. I think that I want to, I talked about what the Republicans or the Democrats need to do to be successful, given the new makeup of the congressional legislative branch. Here's what Republicans need to do, and they have the power to do this in the Senate. They need to go to, I think there are two key things that they can get done, three really, that the Republicans can lead on. The Republicans need to lead on immigration. They absolutely need to lead on that, and they have the opportunity to do that. They need to lead on health care. Right? They need to realize that they couldn't get it done, so let's go back to our Democratic brethren and recognize that they were able to get it done. So let's maybe work together to solve what they got done, because the Affordable Care Act is just as here to stay as it always was. It's not going anywhere. If anybody thought that was going to change, it isn't now. The House of Representatives won't have that happen. And if you just do a bunch of executive orders, then the next administration is going to come in and undo those executive orders. So that's here to stay. Let's go solve that and let's fix it. And then finally, infrastructure. Man, we got roads and things that are tearing up all over the place. We can do something about that. So Republicans, step up. Be leaders. Get together. Let's sing Kumbaya and let's get some things done. Right? Awesome. Hey, thanks, guys.
Well said. Shoot, you got me all jazzed here.
And I haven't even done where I land on this yet.
Haven't got to the best part.
For all those that made us, that were part of this one, thank you. For all the folks here at Real News Communication Network, for Andrew Clark. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Zach Lewis.
A pleasure.
My beautiful wife, Jenna. My beautiful daughters, Emerson and Arabella. Daddy loves you. Thanks for letting me come do this today. While I may be considering a number of things, I do know where I land on this. The sun came out this morning. Regardless of which side of the political aisle you lean, America will go about its day today. Following the election returns, I spoke with friends on all sides of the political spectrum, both conservative and liberal. Some were cheering and others were commiserating for their candidate, and that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. People should be involved enough to want to cheer or even get upset. But regardless of how the outcome impacted you, let's all stay on message. Don't let it divide you from family, friends, or any other American for that matter. America is bigger and better than one midterm election. Sure, we've heard over and over that this is the most important election of our lives. Was it? I mean, was it really? At least not till the next one, which I'm sure we'll hear that all over again. Don't get me wrong, America's has some division in it. We're a divided country in some ways, but I firmly don't believe that this is the most divided we've ever been. I mean, we went through a civil war, for goodness sake. So you think 2018 midterm election was worse than that? The challenge that we have is that the voices of division have bigger microphones and stages from which to opine today. Social media and new technology allows anyone to have the spotlight, air their grievances anywhere, anytime. And as a result, we buy into this lie that our country is the most divided it's ever been. No, I've talked to all sides on the issue, and when we drown out the extremes, most Americans are actually reasonable and want what's best for one another. Americans come together. Americans do what's right. Regardless of whether your party won or lost last night, America is more than one candidate, one party, one election. We're going to be just fine. As a result of the election, Congress is likely going to find itself in a greater stage of gridlock. And you know what? That's okay, too. Change should happen slowly. That's the way the Founding Fathers wanted it. And that's why they created 3 different branches of government in a 2-party system so that one could hold the other in check. They wanted to make sure that we don't have a rapid shift in our society based on a single election. The fact that we have a split Congress, that's just fine. It was structured that way, and we intentionally did it so that we would have to work together to change things, to help keep us from making bad decisions. And I think we can all agree that the founders kind of knew what they were doing. So let's come together. Let's find a way to talk, to move the needle. We've got things to do, folks, like healthcare, immigration, education, infrastructure, to name a few. We ain't got time to hate. The sun came out this morning. It's going to come out tomorrow, too. I know I sound a bit like Mr. Rogers here, but won't you be my neighbor? Finding myself somewhere in the middle. I'm Seth Denson.